Ah, sexism. One of those cute little buzzwords that loses power with every utterance. A word that is used by many to circumvent the vast barriers of entry into the video game journalism field. But let's take a small step back for a moment and break down this behemoth of a three-syllable word and start with its mere, simplistic definition. Sexism simply means prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination, typically against women, on the simple basis of sex. To over-clarify this definition, sexism works upon all the same criteria as racism, except instead of for one's color of skin, it's one's gender that is in the crosshairs. Now, there are many terms and definitions that fall underneath the umbrella of the blanket term that is sexism, but for now, let's just focus on the most simplistic stereotypes, since that seems to be where sexism has been getting most of its traction as of late. Now, these gender-based stereotypes can range from many things, such as genders being limited to certain tasks, that men are nothing more than dirty, sex-crazed, ticking time bombs, that men only perpetuate violence, war, and many other negative problems that pertain to the world as it is today, that women's duties are only necessary in the kitchen and in the bedroom, or in some particular way, shape, form, or fashion, that one gender deserves either A, special treatment, or B, is just superior to another gender as a whole. And it is rather unfortunate that with these stereotypes, one must admit that each one is generated with some truth behind it, whether it be through one's personal observation, such as seeing a man being nothing more than a snobbish pig who only uses women for sex and other pleasurable gratification, or in high school when during any physical activity under any sort of duress, girls would let out a horrifying, blood-curdling shriek of terror if a ball so much as innocently and idly bounced past them. Or in some cases, being the unfortunate victim of circumstances. Being someone of one gender and getting constantly your heart broken and torn to pieces by the other gender, thus you start putting and bestowing negative titles and connotations with aforementioned opposite gender. But now that we've gotten that taken care of, we can all now just straight up honestly acknowledge that there are little nuggets of truth lodged within these stereotypes. And with that said, we can now dive into the subject at hand full force with an open mind and a willingness to learn and debate. Sexism in video games. Now, many people as of late, as we've already clarified, have been riding this hype train that video games contain sexist motives and misogynistic viewpoints, and by proxy, people began throwing the word sexism around all willy-nilly. Now, couple this with the fact that there are a lot of male developers in the video game field, and now group all of that aforementioned information with the fact that there is still this stereotype, this mentality that gaming is still a man's thing. Now we're going to hold here for a second because I want to reiterate that fact. There is still this stereotype that gaming is a man's thing, a man's hobby. So let's fully indulge ourselves with clarifying that up. As I guess I'd say post-90s, more and more females have been coming into the video game phenomenon. Many doing very well in it to the point where they're on pro teams. They're actually competing at high level in many of these games. You see many of them getting well fleshed out character development in games nowadays that were not seen back on the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, and dare I say N64 and Dreamcast. You're getting a lot more content featuring the female gender and breaking away from the chains and tropes that many of them are still complaining about to this very moment in time. Now, with females in video games still on the uptrend, there's still many people who are saying that it's too much, too misogynistic, too pro-male gender. So it is no shock that other flavor of the month vocabulary words such as misogynistic and objectifying, chauvinism, and inequality have come to the forefront as it pertains to sexism in video games and the issues surrounding previously mentioned topic. Clearly, sexism in video games is a legitimate issue that can and should be debated upon. However, most of the people who use it to push their agenda prove time and time again they have not the smallest clue on the subject at hand. Now yes, we have games with girls in skimpy outfits, the triple D mushy breasticles, and not to mention those with the seductive mistress-like tendencies. However, this is only one side of the coin. Remember, if there is ever a head side to an argument, there is also a tails to the same argument. I could sit here and very well tell you that I am absolutely outraged, infuriated, and that video games these days portray men in a bad lighting. Let's take God of War's Kratos that personifies all that is wrong with men, not caring about the people you slaughter, grotesque sex whenever his little soldier demands it, bathing himself in his enemy's blood, etc., etc. However, let's make things a little more interesting. Shake things up a bit and roll the dice. As we all know, it is best to learn not from your own mistakes, but to see your mistakes put in a different lighting, so it's not you doing self-analyzation. No, it is you seeing what other people do, then you can see how other people see it from a third person's perspective. So, what we're going to do, as we all know, it is no secret that I am black, or as some people would like to say, quote-unquote, African American. So let's take the same sort of tendencies that those who cry sexism and replace sexism with racism as a comparative basis. Now let me give a little precursor here. The next few statements and viewpoints are not mine. They are the extremist views of a current anti-video game militia, the feminist movement, but put in a racial setting instead of a sexist one. Mortal Kombat must be racist for its only black character, Jax. How come he has to be the cripple? How come one of those white guys couldn't lose his arms? Why is his love interest got to be the white girl? How come all the black characters in MK die? How come when the original Sub-Zero becomes Noob Saibot and by proxy becomes the evil entity, why does he turn black? Is Mortal Kombat trying to portray that black is evil? I concur with you. I'm an Asian man, and I am absolutely appalled that the Asians featured in the Mortal Kombat franchise have to be subjected to every single Asian stereotype. I mean, when I get into a fight, you don't see me always going, what the? I don't do that. They always think we have to be some crazy martial arts spiritual monk, and I say that's just wrong. Every Asian person is not Bruce Lee. You know what? I have something to add to that. In Metroid Other M, the Anthony Higgs, the Remember Me guy, how come he has to be such an arrogant ass? Always belittling Samus's achievements and calling her princess. Him, much like Sergeant Johnson from the Halo series, always had to be such a trash talker. Did I miss the memo where all of us blacks had to be portrayed as some Samuel L. Jackson clone? Now, let me once again reiterate, those voices were done because I needed to further push the agenda that those were not my viewpoints. That's not what I think. However, if I were to draw those conclusions, I wouldn't necessarily be wrong, since it's a point of discussion that could be brought up on some platform of validation. However, on a less involved platform, let's say an Italian man walks up and says, Mario is racist. Why does Mario have to use flowers and mushrooms and stars to get powered up? Is he some sort of Italian drug lord who trips on this various combination of unstable drugs? Is this how Italians are seen? Are we nothing more than drug dealers and plumbers to you? Now, yes, that Mario one was a bit on the contrived side of the fence, but so are many of these girls that cry sexist. For example, there's this blog here titled I Must Confab. They had an article about the misogyny and sexism in video games, and they brought up a few notable instances, starting with Dead or Alive's Beach Volleyball, or how they described it, and I quote, Team Ninja's highly sexualized fighter and sports game series, Dead or Alive, end quote. And how many of their female characters are dressed in the most skimpy and lewd attire. Now, don't get me wrong, we all know men like looking at those glossy 3D models all glistened up with the pretty water effects the Dead or Alive series has brought to the forefront over the years. But how is the fact of having them in a skimpy outfit sexist? Let's take Christy, for instance. She's an assassin in the Dead or Alive franchise, and whether she's in a bathing suit or in her assassin's outfit, is she still not an assassin? By her wearing something that girls commonly wear does not make the game sexist. Also, keep in mind that sometimes an assassin might have to dress in a less than womanly manner to get close to targets. Just look at Marvel's Black Widow, in which, in and of itself, the name kind of demonstrates that. You lure them in, you make them feel safe, all comfortable, then you bite the head off. But back to Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive 5. Let's just take a look at the men. Let's just look. Look at these pictures. Those abs. Rumors say you can grind a granite sculpture on some of these six-packs. Men also being in revealing clothing, but where's the outrage? Where's my cavalcade of neckbeards shaking their fists in furious anger at the fact that this is a terrible portrayal of how men are depicted in the real world? Where's it at? The second point they brought up was Resident Evil Zero's Rebecca. Well, I could paraphrase what they said, but I'll read it word for word. Quote, "This time the pick is between Rebecca, of the first game, and escaped convict Billy. Rebecca is equally as drippy in this game as she was in the original, coming away with such dialogue gems as, 'Don't call me princess,' in a high-pitched nasal tone." End quote. So, the problem they have here is she comes off in a nasally pitched voice? So, feminists, she says don't call her princess, which is what you guys advocate. However, since she does it in a nasally voice, it's incorrect. It is wrong in some way. So women with nasally voices must, in turn, be living their life incorrectly? Because what if she decided to use a voice that was more seductive, like, "Don't call me princess, you bad boy, you"? Then all of a sudden we have another long laundry list of gripes and problems from the feminist community. However, speaking of lewd dialogue, they also bring up Resident Evil 4's Ashley, the president's daughter, as being another victim of these misogynistic developers. They say she's dumb, never prepared, a bumbling liability, and completely useless overall. Now, I can see how someone might say that's sexist or rooted in some sort of misogynistic behavior, but this is the president's daughter. She more than likely would not have the training to stop zombies, let alone the life experience that comes with a sheltered life in the White House. Also, keep in mind, with the zombies, it's one bite and that's it, so she has to be very careful, and since Leon is a soldier who's seen this type of crisis before and survived, he should be more attentive, be able to handle this high-pressure situation. However, this blog's main gripes with RE4 is the fact that during the ending scene, Ashley tells Leon she's offering some special overtime, which is suggestive, I'll give you that. However, is that sexist? I mean, let's face it, folks, if someone of the opposite gender saved your life, and he or she was fit, attractive, and every other dream attribute, wouldn't you want to covet them to such a degree? They close out their RE4 argument with, she gets a cleavage-heavy bonus costume at the end of the game. If you ask me, okay, the costume may have been a bit much. However, it's extra. It is a post-game addition. It is not something that is core to the gameplay or even what the game is about. Sure, you may say it shows off too much here or there, too much cleavage, too much skin being exposed to the elements, but it further shows that she was not prepared for this. This isn't what she wanted. This isn't how she thought life was going to go when it took a turn for the worse, and it better helps the immersion. She is not supposed to be geared for this because this is not her job. This is not what she was prepared to do. So it also evokes more emotion and more attachment to the game because you realize how helpless this girl really is. Now, a lot of anti-gaming feminists always bring up the fact that the women need to be stronger in these games. But in this case, if Ashley was an ass-kicking biological machine of just awesome grade A destruction, we wouldn't even need our protagonist, Leon. I mean, if she did a lot of the ass-kicking, why would we even need to save her to begin with? She should be doing things on her own. And if that's what you want, there's Tomb Raider. There's 90% of the Metroid franchise. Final Fantasy has a lot of strong female characters. The Mass Effect series can get a couple of shout-outs for that. You can even be the female if you so choose to be. Now, their blog comes to a close with stating the depictions and designs of female characters takes away from the authenticity of the situation at hand, thus diminishing the value of the characters as a whole. Now, here's where, once again, I'm going to ask you to take a step back and ask, in which way is it diminishing? that all of these misogynistic ideas fall upon the design of the females, their characterizations, how they look? Well, then what about the male protagonists? I mean, how often do we get to see the average Joe protagonist? Where's Chubby Johnson? Maybe even overweight Jenkins? Maybe short and stocky Williams? How about a mainstream high-profile minority hero that isn't subjected to the racial stereotypes of being a rapper or a hip-hop artist or being some sort of thug ghetto youth? How about plus-size gamers? Should we be up in arms that every other main protagonist has some sort of rippling six-pack, 5 o'clock shadow, and enough muscular strength to crush a bicep of a regular human being? Now, I would love to see all racial stereotypes, gender stereotypes, and roles completely thrown out of the window. Well, I'd like to see a game where they had a black country singer, or we had a female serial bomber or something that you had to stop, and she was the ultimate evil and things of that nature, building her up as some menacing behemoth that only you and your protagonist or protagonist group can stop. Now, it would be one thing if there was a game out there that had women just aimingly bringing out whore-like behavior and in turn glorifying being a dolled-up explosible sperm canister, or putting you in the shoes of a man who is supposed to go around beating up women. Now, those would be misogynistic acts. Now, let's be fair, I'm fairly certain 90% of the people who throw this word misogyny or any of its variations all around willy-nilly don't even know what the definition of the word is. Misogyny simply means the hatred of women. Now, let me repeat that because I'm sure a lot of you don't even believe me, and I want you to go look it up right now. And now you can see it on screen. I want you to read it with me now. It simply means the hatred of women. And given a lot of the complaints that we hear, it's because women are being saved, helped, and in some cases, too attractive. Some say too much sex appeal, but to have sex appeal, one must be attracted to it, and thus, by proxy, all of these aren't misogynistic. But hey, who am I to say, right? I mean, given the current dynamic of the internet, the video game community, and the feminist militia that has invaded it, one must conclude that showing any sort of sexual capacity for any female character, whether it be antagonist or protagonist in these video games, automatically makes you a sexist, misogynistic, pig who most certainly believes that women should know their place beneath the fecal matter at the bottom of a trash can. Well, dear viewers, I must say I appreciate you for giving me your time. However, this is only part one of the seminar, because in part two, we're actually going to talk about something interesting. Games where these feminists are actually right. Games where there is sexist material, and, key moments that do give their argument quite a bit of legitimacy behind it. So we're going to talk on the other side of the fence for a bit in part two. Love to see ya.